Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I hope you're all doing well. Today, I have the pleasure to talk for 30 minutes or so about the role of HR data and analytics in the future of work. Now, data and analytics is an often talked about topic, and I would like to make it a bit more tangible and a bit more practical and take a look at what it means, data and analytics, how we can leverage it in order to be better at HR, in order to help our organizations perform better, and also throughout the lens of the skills of the HR professional, what are the skills we need in order to be better at this? My name is Eric van Vulpen. I have a background in law, psychology, and business administration, and I'm the founder of the Academy to Innovate HR, or in short, AIHR. AIHR is the largest online educator in the world when it comes to the HR professional. We educate HR professionals in future-oriented skills. And for more information, you can always check out our website. And don't forget to connect with me on LinkedIn if you haven't already. Very excited to be here. In the next 30 or so minutes, I would love to cover three trends that are disrupting HR and what they mean from a data and analytics perspective. Because when we talk about the future of work, of course, the future is hard to predict. We're going to take an attempt at predicting that future, which is something I'm very excited about. First of all, we'll look at data and analytics, the impact of automation and how that relates to data and analytics, and then the requirements that this takes from the HR professional, because we need a different type of HR professional to be ready to start working and get more value from when it comes to data and analytics. So let's start with data and analytics. And I would love to start off with an example, because I can imagine a lot of different organizations are at different levels of maturity when it comes to working with data. Some may already be working with data to a large extent, and some may just be at the beginning of that journey. So I want to start off with a story that I think you all can relate on. And this is the story of an HR director who I spoke with about 2 years ago, who said to me, he said, Eric, I have a frustration. I have about 50 business partners that work in my organization. And what I see these business partners do is that when they talk to managers, they come mostly unprepared. They sit down with the manager and they say, Manager, how can I help you today? And then what happens is that these managers often come with their day-to-day concerns and they start complaining about the issues that they're running into, and they send the HR business partner back with a long list of tasks to do. And these tasks are very often administrative, highly operational tasks. They're not really becoming strategic, this HR director explains and actually complains to me. So I say, okay, well, how would you like to see it? And then the HR director says, well, I don't want my HR directors to go to the manager with an empty block note and then take notes. I want them to turn the entire process around. I first want them to look at the data, look at the KPIs, the business data. How is this manager doing? What are the targets for this manager and for this department? And are they on track to reach those targets? Are they overshooting them? Are they below targets? That is crucial information when it comes to the HR service delivery, because then we can help that manager reach their targets. And these targets are, in the end, the shared responsibility between HR and between the manager. And he then says, well, I don't want them to just look at the KPIs. I also want them to look at the HR data. I want them to look at the data and get a sense of how this manager is doing when it comes to attrition, when it comes to turnover, when it comes to time and attendance data. And all this data is highly relevant. And I want this business partner to take that block note, scribble it full with notes, identify where the manager is doing well and where the manager is not doing so well. And then with that block note, go to the manager and say, Manager, I'm here. I see that you're off on this target. How can I help you? How can HR help you get towards that target and hit that target, actually? This director says, this is the kind of HR business partner that I would like to have. This is the HR business partner that delivers value. This is the HR business partner that has strategic impact. And I think this story really describes a business partner, and it's kind of a future vision, at least it was for this organization, and now 2 years later, they're well on their way to getting there. It was kind of a future vision of where they wanted their business partners to be. And I think it emphasizes the importance of being data-driven. So we've done some research on our own among our learning community, which is rather large. And we got some data points on the intentions of CHROs and HR organizations, how digital they want to be and how analytical driven they want to be, and how they're actually doing when it comes to the execution. And this is all measured on a 5-point scale. So scoring from 1 to 5, strongly disagree to strongly agree. So when we ask about having a digital component in the organizational strategy and into the HR strategy, we see fairly high scores, a 3.6, 3.7. That's a high score on a 5-point scale. So people agree with this on average. And digital is a key objective in the broader people strategy. But if we then ask, and I think this survey has over 500 respondents, all working in HR, often at mid and senior levels. If we then ask, how is the execution actually? Are we actually now using data? Are there sufficient people available to do basic reporting? We see that score starting to drop. And standardized reports are scarcely available at 2.7. And having a data-driven mindset in HR is also very much stuck at the middle. And this is all self-reported data. So I think the actual scores are actually even a tiny bit lower. So we see that there's absolutely a good intention to become more digital, to become more data-driven. But in the execution, there are still a lot of steps that need to be taken in order to become more data-driven. Now, what I think is a key distinction is the distinction between data-driven and analytics. Because when we talk about analytics, I think understanding this distinction between, on the one hand, dashboarding. Dashboarding is about looking back, about what happened in the past, and analytics, what is happening in the future. Can we use that past, that historical data to maybe make an extrapolation or a prediction about what will happen potentially in the future? Those two elements are very, very different. And I'm not advocating that everyone in HR should know how to do analytics, because I think analytics is a very specialized subdomain that only a few people in HR need to do. But everyone in HR should have that capacity to read dashboards, to work with data, to read, interpret, and take action, influence decisions based on data. And that for me is represented by dashboarding, being able to read a dashboard, create a dashboard. When you have your own dashboarding software, you can put some variables, some people variables, some financial variables together and actually get a concrete insight and influence decision-making based on data, because that will give HR, and I don't think I have to advocate this, a much more strategic approach, a much more, it enables HR to speak the same language as the business. So I'm not advocating that everyone should know analytics, even though knowing it is, I think, very good for your career. It's a skill that is well worth having. But at least being data-driven in HR is key. And my question, if you're an HR leader, how data-driven is your organization really? I think that's a good question to think about at the end of the conference. Now, when we look at HR data, I think there are 3 key areas of data in general where we as HR professionals need to become more data-driven in. First of all, we have HR data at the bottom of the circle. HR data, time and attendance, absenteeism, attrition, employee turnover, and so on and so forth. These HR variables are important. Long-term absence, short-term absence, depending on where you live, where you're based, and your industry, you have different HR data. Also certification dates, are the people operating, do they have the right certification to do it? Are they not expired? All of that is HR data, very important. But there's more than just HR data. There's also financial data. HR professionals, or at least the more senior ones, should be able to read a profit and loss statement. And I think a good challenge to give to your business partners or your HR crew, in that sense, staff, is, are you able to read a profit and loss statement? And do you know what the revenue is of the organization last year, and whether it's been, above projections or below projections? Because having that financial understanding is also critically important for HR. People often account between 60 and 70% of total cost of an organization, especially if it's a knowledge-intensive organization, and being able to reduce those costs by just 1 or 2%, for example, can already make a big impact on your margins as an organization. So that's another element of data, category of data critically important to being a more competent HR professional. And the last group of data is business data. We as HR professionals need to have an understanding of the KPIs of the managers. What are some of the business priorities that these managers have, and how can we as HR contribute to them? But that starts with being able to read the same data, speak the same language. So when it comes to HR data, I think these are the three big blocks. Also when it comes to doing analytics. Now, the second trend that I'm seeing is about HR automation. And HR automation goes a little bit beyond just data and analytics, because, of course, the title of my talk is Data and Analytics in the Future of Work. But when we look at the future of work, automation is starting to emerge on the horizon as a quite magnificent, I would say, opportunity, but also potential obstacle for us in HR. So I think it's good to have an understanding of automation and how it impacts what we do when it comes to data and analytics. Now, automation is happening everywhere. 84% of organizations, this is in late 2020 by the World Economic Forum, plan to accelerate their digitization of work processes. And 50% of companies plan to accelerate the automation of tasks. So this is all done, this research is done late in the pandemic already, or at least late 2020. So what does this look like? Well, an example is I was speaking to someone working in this space. He said, "Well, one of the things that we have on the roadmap is time and attendance data. Sometimes employees who work don't fill in when they actually worked. So what happens now is that an HR administrator looks at the data, calls up people, double checks, emails people, and then that's a very manual, labor-intensive process." Now, what they've implemented is that there's a bot. When the bot sees, there's a trend, someone has been working on these slots, but all of a sudden, there's no record of this person working, then they send an automated email to this person, and the person can reply, and then the bot enters this data into the system, which is, I think, a very easy workflow that saves HR much time. Another example is, for example, long-term absence. When someone becomes ill, hopefully it never happens in your organization, but inevitably it does. Someone becomes ill long-term. You have specific organizations that then help you get this worker back on track, and that may do the payments to these workers. And where I'm based in the Netherlands, we have a governmental body who actually start doing the payments for long-term job security. So what happens then is that you need data. You need to send data to that specific organization, but oftentimes you don't have all the data that you need. So this same organization now is implementing a bot between the organization that is picking up this data, needs additional data. The bot looks at which data is missing and then directly gets in touch with the employee to get that data from the employee. Again, there's no people necessary. There's no people needed to knit that data together. So these are both examples of digitization / automation. They're a little bit in the middle of both. They can actually be categorized in both groups. This is happening more and more, and this is impacting the way we work in HR. This is a fantastic, based on research from, I think, Oxford from the top of my head. You can find it on the website, willrobotstakemyjob.com. You can put in a lot of different HR jobs, and it gives the automation risk level for these jobs in, I think, 15 years or so. So somewhere in 2035, what is the risk of this job being automated? And then you see that there are certain roles at a very high level of automation. For example, a payroll and timekeeping clerk. Well, I already give the example. These kind of trends are already happening, but also in compensation and benefits. My question is, this is not happening tomorrow. This is not happening next year, probably in your organization, but this is on the horizon. And how are we preparing the HR workforce to get properly ready for this? That's my question to you. But then also, when we think about, does a role or does a job actually disappear? Well, not really, because in the end, jobs don't get automated. However, tasks do get automated. And this may sound like a little bit of an arbitrary distinction, but it's actually vitally important and has big consequences for us in HR. So let's look at how automation in practice could work. You start with an initial situation with 5 people, each 4 tasks, 20 tasks in total. And then over time, some tasks disappear. Now, first of all, it's important to notice that when tasks are being automated, new tasks are created. These automations need to be maintained. When systems are updated, these workflows need to be embedded again. When a run is not successfully completed, you need to be able to intervene and make sure that the automations are operational again. So you see new tasks emerge. Not the same amount, but there are definitely new tasks emerging. Now, there's two scenarios. Essentially, the first is the cost efficiency scenario. Tasks are automated, and what happens, we need less people. So, it enables us to press down the cost, and the HR department will slowly shrink. That is the first scenario. I don't think this is the best scenario to go for. The second scenario is, I call it adding value. Can we add additional tasks, more value-adding tasks that make sure that we can retain the people, but instead of doing more mundane work, more administrative work, they start to invest in more tactical, more strategic, more value-adding work. And I think a good example of this is a friend of mine who was working in compensation and benefits. And he was working at an organization where a broker organization where managers made agreement with their top stockbrokers on payment. So depending on the deal that they got, these managers sat with this friend of mine. They said, we're compensating this person based on these rules. This profit the person will get, based on these contingencies. And then my friend would go to the system, would enter it all in the system, check the parameters, go back to the manager if there were mistakes. Also on bonuses, and it mainly pertained to sales bonuses. So these stockbrokers being it's similar to sales compensation. And he did this for, I think, half a year or so until they implemented the system where it became self-service. So essentially he was removed, and the system, now the manager, the line manager, would directly enter this data into the system. The system would check the parameters, and it would be approved or disapproved. This led to a lot less errors and mistakes in this data integration. It also meant that half of the work, or 60% or so of the work of my friend, essentially disappeared. Didn't mean he got laid off. Instead, at the moment, he is working as a sales compensation specialist, and he is advising these managers before they make the agreement with their high-performing employees how they can do this best in terms of compensation scheme, in terms of compensation communication. He works in compensation marketing, so he got a number of additional tasks that, in the end, make him much more value-adding to the organization. So I think these are two fantastic scenarios when it comes to automation. On the one hand, a cost efficiency example. On the one hand, how do you really start to add more value with automation? And then if we start looking at the implications of automation, then first of all, we need to understand in HR where our added value is. Because when automation starts to happen, we need to focus on those activities that are more strategic and that add more value to the organization, so we can actually realize that second scenario. I already mentioned maintaining automations requires skills, and we need to start developing some of these skills in HR. Specifically to data and analytics, I already explained some of the implications, because your data quality through automation will be much better. Your ability to make decisions or even automated decisions based on data is much higher thanks to automation. But also analytics. So, the bottom right corner, this analytics part of people analytics, or, doing the actual analytics, this will become more and more automated over time, where at some point you'll just ask a question to a system, and the system will prompt you the answer and will do the actual analytics for you. And you just need to understand which question to ask the system. Google Analytics is already doing it. If you log into your dashboard, Google Analytics tracks website data. It says, I see an anomaly here based on our automated scans. This is an anomaly. Look at it. This web page is loading extra long. This web page got a spike of visitors. So you already see this in practice, and I predict that this is coming closer and closer to people analytics. Whereas, our analytical understanding needs to go up. Not necessarily to do the analytics, but to be much more data-driven, to handle those dashboards on what we saw on this side of the screen. Another implication, I think, of automation is that the unit of analysis becomes the task, not the job. We concluded tasks are automated, jobs are not. So we start to hire people for a set of tasks that over time will start to, maybe disappear, be replaced. So we start to hire not for job descriptions, not for specific jobs, but for sets of tasks. And we also need different skills from people. And I think it also has implications on the role of HR in these automation processes. Back in the day, we were looking, is a role motivational for someone? Yes or no? We had a motivational potential score. When it comes to automation, I think many of these more traditional HR practices on making sure that jobs are motivational, are actually working for the worker, I think will come back when it comes to automation and an increase of automation, not just in HR, but in the broader workforce, especially. Anyway, I think this shows that the world of work is changing, both when it comes to digital capabilities and especially to being more data-driven. And that requires a different HR professional. We believe at AIHR, we believe in a T-shaped HR professional. We've based this on lots and lots of research on our learning community, through the many conversations I have with senior HR leaders, and through extensive quantitative testing. We have developed this T-shaped HR professional with, on the horizontal part of the T, a number of core competencies, and on the vertical part of the T, a number of functional competencies. In terms of core competencies, we have defined 4 core competencies that every HR professional should have. The first being data literacy, business acumen, digital integration, and people advocacy. Now, why I think this is important is, I'll give you an example. When you're in HR, first of all, you need to know where the business is going. That is your business acumen. I actually always like to make this analogy with piloting an airplane. When you fly an airplane, first of all, you need to know where you're going. In HR, in the business, you need to know where the business is going, because otherwise everything you do doesn't add tremendous value. So first of all, you need to know where you are flying, your business acumen. But when you're piloting an airplane, you also have a big panel with all kinds of meters, a speedometer, an altitude meter, your bearing indicator, and a whole bunch of other buttons. These are essentially your HR KPIs. These are your metrics. These are your dashboards, your financial KPIs, your business KPIs. You need to be able to read them and understand what is going well and what is going wrong, because that enables you to intervene with new HR policies, with HR interventions. So that is your being data-driven. But when you fly an airplane, most of the flying happens on autopilot. I think about 90–95% of the flying, actually. Most of your HR service delivery happens through systems, happens through self-service. But as an HR professional, you need to know which elements, as a pilot, you need to understand when you can fly on autopilot and when you need to take over manually. As an HR professional, you need to understand how far your systems can go, but also when you need to take over yourself, and when you need to either improve the technology or need to optimize the technology. And last, people advocacy. When you fly an airplane, you need to be connected, be a service provider to the people in the airplane, and bring them home safely, essentially. As an HR professional, you need to know the best practices when it comes to HR. You need to be a trusted advisor, a workplace champion. You need those core elements. So these 4 for us are the core elements that every HR professional should know. Whether you're an HR generalist, whether you're a senior HR leader, you need to understand the business, be data-driven, have a digital understanding, and be a people's advocate. And then on top of that, depending on your role, you have, of course, a functional competency. And the challenge that I'll wrap up with is, to what degree have you really built that data and, a data-driven culture in your organization? Your business partners or HR advisors, do they look at dashboards, go to the manager with a fully scribbled block note with tangible advice for the manager, or are they more laid back? And the HR professionals in your organization, do they know what technology is out there that they can embed into the organization, because that will enable you to build more of that digital and data-driven culture? Or are they lagging behind when it comes to data or to more digital skills? I think those are the 2 big challenges that I would love to give to you. To think about, do I have all-round HR professionals in my organization, or do they need to level up on some of these skills? So, and then with that, I'll wrap it up. For more information, we have an entire competency framework on these 4 core competencies with different dimensions and behaviors. You can find it at aihr.com/enterprise. And I'll just wrap up in a minute or so that the world is changing. And I think in the pandemic, we're still hopefully slow in coming out of it. We see that the world is changing, that skills are starting to disappear over time. IBM puts the half-life of skills at 5 years, meaning that every 5 years, 50% of the skills that you have, start to disappear or become less relevant. And for technical skills, they put the number even lower. So with skills starting to disappear, there's a bigger need for upskilling, for being, for example, in HR, more data-driven, being more digitally oriented, but also broader in the organization. There's a need to build these competencies and other competencies. So the final challenge that I would love to give to you is, how do you build a competitive organization? You build a competitive organization if that organization can continuously learn and continuously improve. And I would love to challenge you, do you have that in HR? And if not, then, how are you going to embed that into your HR organization? With that said, I would love to know if there are any questions.
Thank you, Eric. I can say they can reach via LinkedIn, or if you can share your mail, they can reach you via mail. Thank you for speech. And can we get, and also there is a networking area. If you are registered at newhrsummit.com, so they can reach you via networking area.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much. And also always reach out on LinkedIn, or my email address is Eric, my first name, at aihr.com. Always very happy to help out.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot. See you next time.